up across the board. If you're not a regular of the channel, we multi-stream on Facebook, on Twitter, Periscope, and then, of course, on our home base on YouTube. So if you're not already subscribed on YouTube, that's our home base. That's where we're putting out the majority of our content, all of our clips. That's where we're staying organized. And it looks like the stream is just about fired up, and it is. We're live across the board. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney here in Scottsdale at the R&R Law Group. Over the course of many years, my team and I, we've helped thousands of people facing criminal charges go through and navigate the justice system. And in the course of those years of representation, we've seen a lot of problems with that justice system. A lot of misconduct from police officers and prosecutors and judges and politicians and basically anybody who's connected to the justice system. There is little tenants and just spiraled out of control chaos that happens from time to time. We're seeing a lot of it in the streets today. We're seeing it with the George Floyd protests. The remnants of that are still sort of spilling over in Portland and Seattle and all over the entire country, and we want to talk about it because we believe that the best way to help improve the justice system is by shining some sunlight down on those who are perpetrating the misconduct. We want to get them out of the system. If we can expose them, if we can shine some sunlight on them, then the theory is that they go away and we're left with the goodness, the good cops, the good prosecutors, the good judges, and the people who really want to help other people through the system. So that's why we started this show called Watching the Watchers, and that's what we do every day during the week at 4 p.m. Arizona time and 7 p.m. Eastern time. So if you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe button. Now, long introduction, but what are we talking about today? This week has been a bit of a whirlwind. We had the debates on Tuesday night. Yesterday, we did an entire show debriefing the debate. We have a couple little things, a little leftovers that we want to clear up because there were two issues that I wanted to dive in a little bit further on. One was the court packing issue that Joe Biden just refused to answer. We've got some clips from Kamala Harris, who, well, we're going to see what she says here shortly. The other thing I wanted to address was, of course, Donald Trump's statement where he was very meekly, if you could even say that, disavowing these Proud Boys. And so we spent some time on that yesterday, but we were looking for some more clarification from the campaign. Did they, what's their explanation for what happened there? So we've got some clips on that as well. So, two big issues for both sides of the aisle. We just want to see what they have to say about it and maybe clear those things up. Now, we've also got some updates on Scotus, right? We have the Democratic contingency on the Senate Judiciary Committee wrote a letter back to the other members, the Republican members, fleshing out what their problems are with this nomination process. And we have a copy of that letter written, authored by all of the Democrats, including Kamala Harris. On the show today, we're going to dive into that. We'll show you what that looks like. And then we've got this clip from Senator Dianne Feinstein to Amy Coney Barrett when she was getting nominated and getting certified to sit on the 7th Circuit. So we've got that clip. And then I want to spend the remainder of the show talking about this new company that you may not have heard of. It went public today. It's called Palantir. Now, if you follow the tech industry or you follow the investment industry, they had their IPO today. What the heck does that have to do with this channel? Well, Palantir is this company that is really tightly integrated with some law enforcement agencies throughout the country. In particular, we're going to talk about the LAPD. What Palantir does is they just gobble up this information from all the different government alphabet letter agencies. They combine them into this database, and it provides some really interesting data that law enforcement uses to go and do their job, right? Investigate crimes and make arrests. The issue that is coming up now is, well, what about our civil liberties? What about our rights to privacy and those types of issues? So they went public today. I think they got valued at $31 billion. Massive company. They're still sort of in a startup mode. They've been around for 10 years. We're going to talk about them. We're also going to talk about a very similar company called XR Vision, which is still very secretive, but we've got some interesting graphics that came out last night. I want to show you some of those. And then we'll just open it up for the chat. So get those fingers ready to rock and roll for the end of the show. We'll have some conversation that takes place live in the chat. So let's dive into it. I know we're probably mostly sick of hearing about the debate, but we wanted to clear these issues up. Now, on this channel, we've been covering the Scotus nomination. We call it Scotus HQ. We're going to be covering everything that's happening in the Senate Judiciary Committee when they do actually have the confirmation hearings for Amy Coney Barrett, and we're also going to be basically following along that entire nomination process throughout, until that judge is seated or rejected, till we have an election, till there's a lot of ways that this can go, but the point is we'll be covering it. So the court packing issue, this came up during the debate, and Kamala Harris is Joe Biden's vice presidential running mate, all right? So, she presumably would have some indication as to how the campaign was going to be answering this question, because when Joe Biden was asked by Chris Wallace, are you considering packing the court? He basically said, whatever I decide, that's what we're going to do. And we know that. We just want to know, what are you going to do? Are you leaning one way or the other? We spent a lot of time on this channel talking about what that means. There's a guy I follow, his name is Scott Adams on Twitter, and he posted sort of a provocative statement today. And there's some people who feel this way, that if the Democrats win the presidency, win the Senate, that would enable them to pack the courts or to modify Congress so that they could expand the number of seats on the court. They could take it from 9 to 13, 15, whatever they want, and then they would automatically get to nominate the judges, and it would tip the balance of power. So now you could have, theoretically, 3 branches of the government all controlled with the Democrats. And Scott Adams, he said that that is essentially the same as being governed in China, right? A one-party system that controls everything that you do. And so, this is something that a lot of people have some concerns about. On the other side of the aisle, you've got some people like Scott Adams who say, yeah, this could be like China. On the other side, you've got people who say, well, if Amy Coney Barrett is nominated and she gets the seat on the court, that this is going to, set women's rights back 100 years and, all of these other arguments the other direction, like it's the end of the world and the whole country is going to melt down. So again, I don't think it's either one of those two things, but it is an important issue. It has the capacity, the ability to really alter the fundamental course of this entire country if the court gets modified. It's been 9 judges, I think, for the last 150 years. And so if this moves forward, it's going to be a big deal. So when Joe Biden refused to answer that question, naturally, Jake Tapper and CNN, they're going to go over to his running mate, Kamala Harris, and she's going to give us her version of what her answer is. Now, I want to show you this clip, and before I do, I'm going to explain to you that I actually sped the clip up to 1.75 speed, and it's to illustrate a point. What happens is when these politicians, and Kamala Harris is a lawyer, she's a prosecutor. She used to put people in prison in San Francisco. She was long history there, has been sort of this top cop person until the political world changed a little bit, and now she's sort of not really talking about that record so much. We saw in the Democratic primary, Tulsi Gabbard went after her pretty hard on it, and she didn't really have much to say at that point. So a lot of the time, right now she's sort of pivoting away from these issues, but we wanted to hear from her. What is your position on this? We have a clip from 2019 we're going to play here in a minute where she does actually answer the question. But in this next clip from CNN, we're going to see Jake Tapper ask Kamala Harris a question, and she goes on and just runs out the clock talking for 2 minutes without actually answering the question. And then Jake Tapper notes that. So this is a strategy that attorneys use. This is a strategy that politicians use. This is a strategy that your kids may use, right? They just keep talking and talking and talking because they don't want to answer the question. And it's pretty transparent in this clip, which is why I sped it up. Didn't want to listen to, 2 minutes of non-answers. So what you're really going to get is about 35 seconds of it. But you're going to see, just listen to it compressed. There is no answer here. And Jake Tapper notes that. So let's take a look at what Kamala Harris has to say about packing the court.
Election. There are a number of Democrats in Washington, as you know, who are saying that if Judge Barrett is confirmed and if you and Joe Biden win and the Democrats take back the Senate, then there should be consideration of adding seats to the U.S. Supreme Court. Neither you nor Joe Biden are willing to give a straight answer as to whether or not you're willing to entertain that idea, but it's not some fringe idea. Democrats in Washington are talking about it. Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader in the Senate, has said that he's not taking anything off the table. Is that an idea that you're willing to think about?
Here it goes.
We are 35 days away from an election that is probably the most important election of our lifetime and our children's lifetime. And there is nothing about these next 35 days that Joe or I will take for granted. And so the focus right now is on reminding people that we have this election that is very much in play. It is about reminding people that people are voting right now. Almost 1 million people, Jake, in our country have already voted. We are in the midst of an election, and the Republican leader of the Senate, together with Donald Trump, are, in the spirit of hypocrisy, trying to push through a nominee while the American people are voting. And so Joe has been really clear. Let's focus on what's happening right now. Deal with later. Focus on what's happening right now, which is the American people are voting, and they should be the ones to decide who will have the next lifetime appointment to the United States Supreme Court. Let's not get distracted. Let's be focused on what is right in front of us, because there's a lot at stake in terms of the integrity of our democracy, of our election system, and this process that should take place over the next 35 days.
I will respectfully note that you also declined to answer that question with me. Senator Kamala Harris, I appreciate your time this evening. Thank you so much.
Good to be with you.
Yeah, so 2 minutes of Kamala Harris running through a non-answer. And, in my mind, if the answer is not a no, then it's pretty close to a yes, right? It's like, yeah, can't say no to that. So maybe I will have that extra piece of cheesecake. Bring that over to me. It sounds pretty good. We're going to leave open the door on that thing. So I think that is really what we can take away from. Now we have, very recently this week, we have Joe Biden who said, whatever I decide that's the issue. Then we have Kamala Harris who comes out and says, nothing really. Talks for 2 minutes. We've already, been voting. They said, hey, are you going to pack the court if you win the election and you get the Senate? That would give you, the 2 branches of government. You can remake the third. What are you going to do? Non-answer for 2 minutes, which is why I sped it up. Don't need to listen to 2 minutes of non-answers. Now, we do have a clip back from 2019. So this article came from the New York Times. It also came from Bloomberg. I think it was confirmed by both of them. Kamala Harris said that she is, in fact, open. This was in 2019. She is open to expanding the Supreme Court. She accused the Republicans of creating a crisis of confidence in the nation's highest court. She said she's interested in applying term limits to the court and limiting the number of nominees for any particular president, which is not possible without a U.S. constitutional amendment, which would require just a massive amount of political capital to get both houses of Congress to pass it, to get the president to sign it, to get the states to ratify it. The number of nominees or the number of seats in the Supreme Court can be modified. That is set by Congress. But you in order to limit the life term, you got to amend the Constitution. We went through this previously on this channel. You can't do it just by congressional bill. You have to amend the Constitution because the U.S. Constitution says that they shall enjoy the tenure of their office as long as they're in good standing or good behavior, whatever I clipped out and actually read it verbatim from the Constitution. I probably should have that memorized, maybe not, but it is in there. And so if she wants to say that a president can only nominate 2 people, again, there's nothing in the Constitution that says that. So those powers are expressly written in there. If she wants to modify them, she's going to need a constitutional amendment. Don't think that is going to happen. But we do have this clip from that article back in 2019, so I want to play it here. Pretty short clip here because I think it's part of an ad, but she runs through and she says, I'm open to a conversation about increasing the number of people on the U.S. Supreme Court. I'm open to it. So let's see what this clip has for us.
Are you open to expanding the size of the Supreme Court?
I am open to that discussion.
All right. So, I'm open to that discussion before we go over to Kirsten Gillibrand. So this must have been during the primary. So she's open to the conversation about it. It's not a hard no, but it's not a yes. It's, I'm open to it, which in my mind is a yes, right? If the Republicans are successful in getting Amy Coney Barrett nominated, confirmed, and seated on the Supreme Court, I don't think there's any question about it. If the Democrats win the Senate and the House, they're not saying no, which means yes, as far as I can tell. So that's that issue for the Democrats. Very open, probably likely possibility of actually increasing the seats on the court. And if we needed them to tip the balance of power right now, if Amy Coney Barrett is nominated, it's going to be a 6-3, so 6 conservative judges, 3 liberal judges. And if the Democrats wanted to regain that balance, if they wanted to tip those scales, they would have to add another 4, so it would be a 7-6. So they would get to have 4 new judges appointed quickly within that president's term, as long as that Senate remains in power. And so I think they could do it if they had the political willpower to do it. Sounds like they may do it. Let's talk about the Trump side. So we just covered the Bidens, cleared up an issue over there. The issue that I wanted to talk about with Donald Trump and his campaign or his debate performance was this issue when it came up, and they talked about, do you disavow the white supremacist? Chris Wallace came out and said, do you disavow the white supremacist, the white nationalist, any of those people? Donald Trump says, give me a name, which was a huge mistake in my mind. Joe Biden throws out the Proud Boys. So Donald Trump, you remember in the OJ trial when they gave OJ the gloves and he put them on. He's like, they don't fit, they're tight. And the joke was, well, you don't give the takeaway was you don't give the defendant evidence to put them on and give their opinion on it, right? That was a critical error that the prosecutors made in that case. They got a lot of flack for that. Why would they give him, the very materials that he could manipulate and say they don't fit, and so he gets to show it, and he gets to sort of put the prosecutor's office on the defense as he's going through that. In this same situation, that's what Donald Trump did. He gave Joe Biden the opening and he said, pick anybody you want. Joe Biden could have said anything, right? He could have said, disavow Rush Limbaugh. I think he's a white nationalist, right? That would have alienated the entire Republican Party if he had done that. But that's why you don't give that power to somebody else to dictate what you're going to say. He should have responded to Chris Wallace and said, yeah, of course I disavow white supremacists. I absolutely disavow white supremacists. And this was something that a lot of people, myself included, were a little bit frustrated about. You heard me on the show yesterday just saying, why can't these guys just say it? Why can't Donald Trump just say, I disavow the white supremacists? White supremacy is wrong. Any type of racial and prejudice, all of it is wrong. You could have given, a very concrete statement. Now, to be fair, he has done that many, many times. I've seen him being asked this question many, many times. He's given public speeches. He's talked about this ad nauseum. And so for them to keep asking him this question, I can understand his frustration. I can understand what he's, getting irritated about asking this, answering this question, but that's just too damn bad. He's the president. He's in the middle of a national debate being watched by 60-something million people. Say it again. Say it again unequivocally. That would have made me happy. But we wanted to see, what did the campaign have to say about it? Yesterday, we didn't hear much about it. I mean, the debates were so lit up. People were lit after watching that debate. Everybody I talked to was like in this sense of a slumber, like emotionally beaten by both of these candidates who were running for office. And so there wasn't a lot there, but we were able to find some clips about what did they say. We have Kayleigh McEnany, who is the press secretary for the White House. She had a statement. Kayleigh McEnany, I don't know how to say her name. We'll call her Kayleigh, and she is the White House press secretary. So they were asking her about it, what did he mean on that? And so we have a clip from her actually addressing that with the press corps.
I'd like to ask you for a definitive and declarative statement without ambiguity or deflection. As the person who speaks for the president, does the president denounce white supremacism and groups that espouse it in all their forms?
This has been answered yesterday by the president himself, the day before by the president himself on the debate stage. The president was asked this. He said, sure, 3 times. Yesterday, he was point blank asked, do you denounce white supremacy? And he said, I've always denounced any form of that. I can go back and read for you in August 2019, in one voice, our nation must condemn racism, bigotry, and white supremacy. In August of 2017, racism is evil, and those who cause violence in its name are criminals and thugs, including the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and other hate groups. I have an entire list of these quotes that I can go through with you. Yeah. He has condemned white supremacy more than any president in modern history.
Just to clear it up this morning, can you make a declarative statement that you denounce, that the president denounces it?
I just did.
Yeah.
The president has denounced this repeatedly. The president was asked this. You're contriving a storyline and a narrative.
I'm just asking you to put this to rest.
I just did. I read you all of the quotes, and if you need to see them in writing, I will put them in an email. Paula.
Yeah, it is frustrating. This is regardless of what political side of the aisle you're on, it's a frustrating thing. To have to continually answer questions like that. I get how frustrating it is. It's like, we see this all the time when the police are interviewing our clients. Are you sure you didn't beat her? Are you sure? Are you positive? I'm going to ask you again. I'm going to come back tomorrow. Are you sure you didn't hit her? You sure you didn't beat her to death? Did you use your fist? Did you use your left fist or your right fist? Did you use that lamp? Did you use a bat? Were you texting her? Were you, it's like, enough already, right? We've answered that question. In law, there's an objection you can make. It's called asked and answered. So if you're in court and you're cross-examining somebody and you ask them a question, so let's say I'm in court and I'm cross-examining a police officer on the stand, and I ask that officer, I say, hey, have you ever been involved in any sort of disciplinary proceedings that would have gone on your record? And the officer gives me an answer, and he says, well, long answer. He does a Kamala Harris type of routine. He's, spinning all over the place, but he does answer the question. Well, what happens is sometimes attorneys will not really catch that they answered that question. So, he may go on for 3 minutes and give you this big, win. Well, I've been on the force for 45 years. And over the course of that 45 years, I've had over 1,000 traffic stops and all of that, right? To sort of just sugarcoat around the issue. But you want to get right to the point. You want to, yes or no, right? Were you disciplined or not? And if that officer, answers yes somewhere in that huge soliloquy, sometimes what'll happen is an attorney will get thrown off. They'll say, well, that didn't sound like an answer to me, so I'm going to ask it again. Officer, have you been subjected to disciplinary proceedings before in your past? If it's the same exact question and that officer gave us an answer already, then the prosecutor can object. The prosecutor can just jump on and say, hey, excuse me, judge, asked and answered. Objection, asked and answered. Why is that objection allowed? It's because if the jury is hearing a defense attorney or a prosecutor, the defense can make this objection also. Can say asked and already answered, because you don't want the same questions coming up over and over and over again, because what happens is that can bias the jury. The jury will hear you asking multiple times, did you beat your wife? 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 Have you been ever disciplined? Disciplined, this, right? On and on and on and on. And the court doesn't want that to happen, because that can start to program people's minds, and it can really persuade people one way or the other. So you don't want to do that, and really that's kind of what's happening here, right? The press is constantly saying it's never good enough. No matter what Donald Trump says, no matter what this press secretary says, it's not good enough. So they're always just going to keep moving that needle a little bit and keep throwing that question out there, because the question itself is damaging. The question itself causes people to think, well, wait a minute. They're not refusing it. They're not condemning it again. And so, it's frustrating. It's very frustrating for me to even hear her not just say, yes, he condemns white supremacy. Next question. She moves on to the next one. But I understand why they're doing it, because they don't want to have to answer this question every single day between now and the remainder of the election. They don't. Enough already, right? We know he's condemned these people many, many times. We have video clips of it. We're going to play a few of those here in a quick minute. But, it's something that is certainly frustrating. And she ran through the quotes, and she can go through the quotes. There's probably 100 more quotes that she can go through of Donald Trump condemning it. It still, I thought, was a pretty big mistake for the campaign, or when Donald Trump said it. Let's hear from Donald Trump himself. And, is this good enough for you? Let's take a look.
Yeah. I don't know who the Proud Boys are. I mean, you'll have to give me a definition, because I really don't know who they are. I can only say they have to stand down, let law enforcement do their work. Law enforcement will do the work more and more. As people see how bad this radical liberal Democrat movement is and how weak, the law enforcement's going to come back stronger and stronger. But again, I don't know who Proud Boys are, but whoever they are, they have to stand down, let law enforcement do their work.
Mr. President, in this speech when you said stand by, that's my first question.
Just stand by. Look, law enforcement will
just
do their work.
glossed right over that.
Down. They have to stand down. Everybody. They have to stand, whatever group you're talking about, let law enforcement do the work. Now, Antifa is a real problem, because the problem is on the left.
So then he changes, right? So then the conversation changes, which is the right move, right? He's got to answer it and then pivot and start throwing it back on the left. We don't need to listen to that. He goes on for another couple minutes about how bad Antifa is, and they should be disavowed, and why didn't Joe Biden disavow Antifa, and and the rioters and the people who were burning buildings down and all that stuff, which is a valid question. I don't know why Chris Wallace asked him to disavow the Proud Boys, who I had never heard of, like Donald Trump. I had never heard of them until this came up at the debate, and then I looked at it, and we actually, went through a lot of detail about who the president was. It's not even, it's not a white guy. It's an Afro-Cubano guy. A lot of interesting things there. But the point is, that was his response. I didn't know who the Proud Boys were. I don't know anything about them, which, I'm not real sure that you can believe that. It sounds like, kind of a fib there. I'm going to guess that he probably knows who they are. Why? Because his campaign surely had to advise him about this, right? I mean, you would have to imagine that if they didn't advise him about it, that would be pretty incompetent, because if you're running for president, I think you want to know the different constituencies that exist around the country because you need their votes. And so I would presume that he knew about them, but maybe he didn't. And if he didn't, why didn't he say so at the debate? The Proud Boys, who's that, Joe? I have no idea who that is. Yeah, Chris, I disavow the white supremacist. Actually kind of tired of saying it. I've said it 100 times. You're asking me again because the question itself is accusatory. If people keep asking you over and over and over, are you sure you're not a white supremacist? I know you answered this last year. I know you answered this last 10 minutes ago, but are you sure you're not a white supremacist? Because I'm not clear on that. There's still me, and there's a lot of other people who aren't clear on this. You sure you're not a white supremacist? It's like, enough already. All right. So we have that clip. Now, Donald Trump, his campaign came out with this little video.
Rejected David Duke. I've rejected the KKK.
Do you want white supremacists to vote for you?
No, I don't at all. Not at all.
Racism is evil. And those who cause violence in its name are criminals and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned forcefully against hatred, bigotry, and violence, and strongly
All right, so you get the point. His campaign spliced together all of the clips that he has done or he has said over the years about, exactly who he disavows, KKK. I think he added them to the terrorist watch list or something like that. He also disavowed David Duke specifically by name. He said, we saw a little bit of a clip from the Fine People hoax that we talked about yesterday, where he says, the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists, they should be condemned totally. Joe Biden brought up the Fine People hoax, and he did a pretty lame job of refuting that. And it didn't feel right, didn't feel good. We wanted to hear a little bit more of, an unequivocal sort of denunciation of these things, especially now at this time when there are a lot of, there is a lot of chaos on the streets. That being said, Joe Biden absolutely should have been asked the same question. We've been covering these protests and these riots and all of the mayhem on the streets for a long time now, several months. And we started this show back in March, and we've been making videos long before that. So we've been covering it. I have not heard once of the Proud Boys, but I've heard many, many times of Antifa. I've seen videos of them. I've seen their organization. So the idea that they are just an idea or a thought, Antifa is not. We see it all over the place. They're organized in these little cells around the country. And the fact that Chris Wallace didn't bring that up or ask Joe Biden to disavow it, I would have liked to have seen it from both sides. Trump can disavow one side. Joe Biden can disavow the fringe of his wing of the party. And maybe the volume on the entire country and what we're seeing on the streets can be turned down a little bit. But Trump got the question. Joe Biden didn't. To me, it felt like a 2-on-1 for sure. And that's just what it is, right? It's just how these things go. Trump's an adult, and he can figure it out on the next debate. And hopefully we see a better performance and more unequivocal denunciation of the bad things in the country. There's no reason to even be equivocal about it. Just get rid of it. All right, so that's the wrap up from the debate. That's the leftovers. I think that's it for the debate. I think we're done with that here. Those were the outstanding issues that we wanted to tackle and make sure we had some clarity on. Now we do. We'll see how it continues to unfold. But hopefully we're done with that because it's continual brain damage as far as I'm concerned. All right, let's move on to the Supreme Court. This is Scotus HQ. Not a lot here, but I do want to share with you a little bit about what we have seen from the Democrats. So a couple of weeks ago, or I think last week, we covered this. This was a situation where Senator Lindsey Graham, who's facing a very difficult reelection in his state of South Carolina, I think he's from, he is moving this thing forward in the Senate. And so he has laid out a pretty aggressive timetable in terms of confirming Amy Coney Barrett. We know that's the nominee. We did a live stream on that day, and now she is the nominee. So the issue here is, can they squeeze her in before this election occurs? And the Democrats are doing everything they can to make sure that doesn't happen, because as soon as that November 3rd date comes and goes, if there is a new president, suddenly and a new Senate, even though there's some additional time for Donald Trump to finish his term and ram that nomination through, the political willpower is going to just be dissipated. So we had the chart here on this channel about, what Democrats are where, who's on the left, who's on the right, where the senators are sitting, which ones are the squishy Republicans who can go either way. I think that if Amy Coney Barrett is not nominated or not confirmed by the time the election happens, we go post-election, the willpower of those squishy Republicans and probably a lot of other Republicans is just going to vaporize. In other words, they will no longer have the votes if Trump loses the election or if the Republicans lose the Senate. So they're trying to cram this thing through quickly. The Democrats are doing everything they can to not get her confirmed quickly. Lindsey Graham laid out an aggressive timetable on making sure that goes through. And now we have a letter that was authored yesterday from Senator Dianne Feinstein, who is the ranking member on the Senate Judiciary Committee for the Democrats. And so here's what she has to say. This letter came out yesterday, and she's sending it over to Lindsey Graham. She says, hey, on September 19th, we wrote, don't consider filling the seat, Judge Ginsburg's seats. Amy Coney Barrett has been formally nominated. We object to the timeline you've laid out. We renew our objections. Great. President announced on September 26th that he'd be nominating Amy Coney Barrett. You scheduled the confirmation hearing on October 12th, just 16 days after the president's announcement. The Senate Judiciary Committee, has this questionnaire and all the attachments and all these things. And basically she's saying, we don't have enough time on this thing. The timeline is a sharp departure from past practice, undercuts the Senate's ability to do its job. Specifically, she's saying the FBI needs to thoroughly vet the nominee and her background as part of the process. The production and review of documents that may bear on the nominee's fitness. Adequate time to review the nominee's entire record. Adequate time for questioning the nominee, including the submission of written questions for the record. This timeline, blah, blah, blah. We urge you to delay the consideration until the American public deserve a deliberate, thorough process, and this falls far short. This is signed by a number of the other senator members, I think all of them, who are on the Judiciary Committee: Feinstein, Durbin, Klobuchar, remember her from the Democratic primaries, Richard Blumenthal, Cory Booker, another primary, and then Kamala Harris. We've got all of these other people. Nobody who really stands out as anything particularly interesting. But the main point here is that they want more time because they think, or they're saying, that we haven't had enough time to investigate her. We haven't had time to ask her any questions. We haven't had time to review her background. The FBI hasn't had time to vet her and ensure that she is qualified to be on the Supreme Court, security clearances and all of that stuff. But, it is interesting because Senator Dianne Feinstein just actually talked to Amy Coney Barrett during her Seventh Circuit nomination process. You may remember this clip from the confirmation hearings back when Amy was on the facing the Senate.
On this side, have this very uncomfortable feeling that, dogma and law are two different things. And I think whatever a religion is, it has its own dogma. The law is totally different. And I think in your case, Professor, when you read your speeches, the conclusion one draws is that the dogma lives loudly within you. And that's of concern when you come to big issues that large numbers of people have fought for years in this country.
Please respond to that notion that a real commitment to religious faith is at odds with...
Here comes Amy Coney Barrett. We are going to hear from her. She addresses it.
Senator, I see no conflict between having a sincerely held faith and duties as a judge. In fact, we have many judges, both state and federal, across the country who have sincerely held religious views and still impartially and honestly discharge their obligations as a judge. And were I confirmed as a judge, I would decide cases according to the rule of law, beginning to end, and in the rare circumstance that might ever arise, I can't imagine one sitting here now, where I felt that I had some conscientious objection to the law, I would recuse. I would never impose my own personal convictions upon the law.
Yeah, and that's a good answer. She's going to be very solid at these confirmation hearings. What do the Democrats want? What does Senator Dianne Feinstein want? Do they want just a bunch of atheists on the court? If that's what they want, that's fine. But there are many, I think most judges probably have some sort of religious affiliation. They're Jewish, they're Protestant, they're Catholic, like Amy Coney Barrett is, right? A lot of people, the majority of the American country believes in some sort of religion, some sort of organized religion. I don't know what the official numbers are, but I think it's pretty close to everybody, right? Atheism is a small contingent of the country. And so, the idea that they're going to make this an issue I think is troubling for them. There's going to be a lot of Catholics. There's going to be a lot of Christians in general who are going to be, not too happy that she's getting beaten up over this thing, whereas maybe some of the other judges didn't, even though that they're technically part of a religion. So the fact that Amy Coney Barrett is a little bit, more involved or takes it very seriously in her personal life is somehow a disqualifier. I don't think that's going to sit well. But the other point of showing you that clip was she just got confirmed to the Seventh Circuit. She just got questioned by Senator Dianne Feinstein. So what is she complaining about? She was already questioned, already vetted to sit on the Seventh Circuit. Are they thinking that they didn't do as good of a job as they should have? That it's okay if you have a criminal background or you fail your FBI background check or any of those things, as long as you're just on a circuit court. But as soon as you go to the Supreme Court, we got to check everything now. That's not how that works, right? This woman has already been vetted. They already asked her the questions. This is why, by and large, presidents nominate from the circuit courts. Kavanaugh came from a circuit court. They all come from circuit courts. Most of them do, because they've already been confirmed. We already know on the record, Amy Coney Barrett got confirmed. There's going to be a handful of Democrats who already voted for her, and the fact that they're not going to vote for her now is purely attributable to political partisanship. So we're going to see, where that goes. The other issue that Senator Dianne Feinstein brought up in her memorandum, in her letter over to Lindsey Graham, is this idea that this is happening too quickly. And so we found this chart from CNBC that shows the length of time that it takes, that it has taken for other judges to be nominated and confirmed onto the Supreme Court. And so some of them are long and some of them are not. And we're about 35 days out, I think 34 days out from the election. Amy Coney Barrett got nominated, I think, about a week and a half ago. So, she's probably in the 40-something day range. And we take a look at some of these people, and Harriet Miers was nominated by Bush. She did not get confirmed. She got just stonewalled totally, and I think that was probably a good move. She was not confirmed to the court, so that nomination period ended with a no vote, and she did not get confirmed. It happened quickly. The others, though, did, right? We have Justice Ginsburg, who got confirmed in 42 days. And I think that's basically going to be what Amy Coney Barrett looks like if she is confirmed. We have some other ones. Ford nominated Stevens. He got nominated and confirmed in 19 days. And Judge O'Connor, who was the first female judge, got nominated in 33 days. So, the idea that this is without precedent is just, it's not true. This goes back even further than just this sort of modern era, going back to Ford, Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush 2 and Obama. But this goes back, many, 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 many other presidents. And the idea that there's not precedent there is just wrong. There is precedent there. Stevens got nominated and confirmed in 19 days, O'Connor in 33 days, Ginsburg herself in 42 days. So Amy Coney Barrett is right there in that timeline. So Senator Dianne Feinstein's, her letter to me just was a political letter. I actually did kind of go through her Twitter account when she posted that, and a lot of people who I think are left-leaning people, liberals, were saying, okay, thanks for the nice letter, but what are you really going to do about this? Like, you sent a letter, not going to do anything about it. We want to see you fight harder and do more stuff. So we'll see. We don't know if this is a token gesture. As we've covered previously on the show, the Republicans have the numbers, right? We've confirmed that Mitt Romney is open to a vote. We've confirmed that Lisa Murkowski is also open to a vote. So as it stands right now, it's looking like it's 52 with the Republicans, 48 with the Democrats and the Independents, along with, I think, Susan Collins from Maine is going to be joining with the liberal contingency of the group. And we'll see what happens when that nominee, when the confirmations hearings start on October 12th. We are going to be covering that highly in depth. So if you've not already subscribed on this channel, go ahead and hit that button and share it with your friends so they can come and join us during that period of time of even more chaos. All right, so the next story, we're going to dive into some criminal justice news now. We see that there were some arrests made, I believe it was yesterday, with the LASD, so the Los Angeles Sheriff Department shooting. And I want to cover this briefly because we're going to get to Palantir and we're going to get to XR Vision, and we've got some interesting things I want to talk about. And how do they find this guy? But here we have some information that a Compton man, so you remember back, this was maybe about a month ago, there were these two LA County Sheriff's officers who were sitting in their patrol car, and somebody in a hood just came up and just started firing through the window, hit both of those officers. To my knowledge, both are alive and recovering. Thank God, they're okay. And this thing sort of was was not good, not okay. This was a really high escalation of things, and we wanted to see what was going to be happening there. So we do have some information that that suspect was ultimately caught.
The car raised a pistol.
Remember that scene right there?
Several rounds inside of the vehicle,
and then took off.
Both of the sheriff's deputies.
So it turns out that was a Compton man. He was arrested. Attempted murder is what he's been charged with. Fired on 2 deputies, ran away. Both deputies were struck. Female deputy was hit in the face and the male deputy was hit in the head. Both were hospitalized in critical condition and have been released to recover. The man who is responsible for the shooting has been identified as 36-year-old Dianne Lee Murray. He's been charged with premeditated attempted murder of a peace officer, possession of a firearm by a felon. Bail in his case has been set at $6.15 million, which is, a very high number, but probably reasonable under the circumstances. If he is convicted, he faces possible life sentence in state prison. And the police really have had no, they haven't identified any motive for this. And this is something that I thought, I was very curious to see, why did this individual do this? Is this a spillover from Antifa? Is this something that is a spillover from BLM? Is this the Proud Boys that everybody keeps talking about? What is going on here? Or is this just a disgruntled person who's not part of any of the groups? He just doesn't like cops, somebody who's mentally sick, somebody who's just, purely evil and wants to just go shoot innocent cops in their cars. There's no question that those type of people exist also. But we wanted to know more about it, just a little bit more, just so we could kind of understand what's happening out there. And we have a press release from the Sheriff's Department. Not a ton of information here. I'll give you a couple highlights on what we're talking about. But we see a Compton man charged today. He was, we got a case number here. 2 counts of willful, deliberate, premeditated attempted murder. Dianne Lee Murray, he was arraigned in Los Angeles Superior Court. He walked up to the car, fired 2 shots, bond set at $6.15 million, or that's what the prosecutors are recommending. He was charged on September 17th, 1 felony count of carjacking and second-degree robbery and assault with a semi-automatic firearm, personal use of a firearm. So even before this incident with these officers, he was already charged with 1 felony count of carjacking, second-degree robbery. And the question there is, why was he even out of custody? If he just was arrested a few weeks ago on literally second-degree robbery, carjacking, using a firearm charges, what is he doing on the streets? Be very curious to know how he got out of custody. There are some of these groups that are posting bond for people and helping them get released after they're arrested during the riots and the protests, or I guess other crimes as well. And so I'm curious what happened there. He was arrested on September 15th. He shot at the deputies. He faces an additional count of attempted murder, and so on. The case remains under investigation by the Los Angeles Sheriff Department. So, we'll see what happens with that. We still don't have any idea on a motive. We see that the LASD said that when somebody asked about the motive, that Murray, so they said specifically Murray is a Compton resident, known felon, lengthy rap sheet. LASD believes he acted alone when carrying out the ambush. LASD won't comment on the specific motive, but they say Murray hates police and wants them dead. So we'll see if any more information comes out about that, but we certainly don't want to see any more of that. So glad that arrest was made. Glad that guy's off the street, and that is coming from a criminal defense attorney. Now, he deserves due process. He deserves his day in court and all that stuff. But what happened there was just horrendous. All right, so let's move on. Previously on this channel, we have covered the situation of the Nexium sex cult, the DOS, the sex cult that was happening. You remember this story from a couple of years ago when the Smallville actress and some of these actresses were involved in this weird cult where they were, burning and branding women. There was a guy named Keith Raniere who was branding his initials on these women. There was a lot of, trafficking these people from Mexico into the United States. This huge pyramid scheme that was going on with this sort of self-development program known as Nexium. And then we had this woman, Claire Bronfman, who was the heiress to the Seagram liquor fortune. When I was in college, had a lot of that Seagram liquor. Not particularly any good, but we did buy a lot of it. So that means that this family made a lot of money. And, this woman was the heiress to that entire organization. And she was spending a lot of her fortune going forward and actually supporting this organization, actually defending them, hiring these private investigators, and doing a lot of really, gross stuff. And so the question that we had here, is this woman who's worth several $100 million, who's part of that sort of upper echelon of society, is she going to get the same amount of punishment for her involvement in this entire ordeal as you or I would. And it's looking like, yeah, she's getting a pretty hefty sentence there. We covered this a couple days ago on this channel. The original charge that she was facing were all sorts of these trafficking charges and whatnot, but the prosecutors during the sentencing phase were asking for 5 years in prison. Well, today we learned that the judge gave her almost 7 years, 6 months and 6 years and 9 months. So Claire Bronfman was actually sentenced for her role in the sex trafficking group. She admitted to credit card fraud. She was using her credit card to manipulate some money from one person to another. She was taken into custody to begin her jail term immediately. So that's what happens when you are sentenced into prison or jail. If at the end of your case, if you're out of custody, and you're now being sentenced to prison, the day of your sentence, they take you into custody. So she is now in custody, and her attorneys are saying that, we're going to appeal this thing to the end of the world. She was very non-remorseful in her sentencing memorandum. So she recommended, she wrote a letter to the judge and asked the judge for leniency. They were asking for no jail, but the judge gave her almost 7 years, 6 months, or 6 years and 9 months. The judge, Judge Nicholas Garafuis, said her crimes were not committed in a vacuum, and her close relationship with Rainier was too close. He could not ignore that relationship. He said, I don't know how many other multimillionaires are out there ready to devote limitless resources at their disposal to supporting pyramid schemes run by dangerous criminals. So the judge, kind of came down on her, and I was interested in how this judge was going to rule. When we went over the sentencing the sentencing memo that she sent in, that type of letter was not something that I would have recommended that she write. So she obviously has high-powered attorneys and a lot of money, probably the best legal defense that money can buy. But there's only so much that a defense attorney can do when the client wants to do something. And so in this case, we read through her letter, and we were specifically highlighting a couple of the points where she refused to even sort of admit that she was remorseful for her involvement with Nexium or with DOS. She basically said, they were very helpful to me. I'm not going to disavow them. And then she went on to DOS, which was really the gruesome sort of sex cult that existed. And she again refused to disavow them. That does not sit well with judges. They want to see that you're extremely remorseful, changing your life, no longer involved with any of those people, admitting to your mistakes, and wanting to wipe the slate clean. That's not what she said in her letter, and the judge is sentencing her accordingly. So she's going to spend 6 years, 9 months in prison. She's getting a longer sentence than even the prosecutors recommended, and that's that story. So she's going to go to prison for a while. They're going to appeal it for a long time, and we'll see what happens. All right, the next story I want to cover today, sheriff out of Williamson County, Robert Chody, was booked on a $10,000 bond. A sheriff was indicted, and he got a $10,000 bond. We're talking about this guy. This guy is Robert Chody, and he is, this is his booking photo. So he just got arrested, and he's pleased about that, right? He's the sheriff. I think, if I'm not mistaken, this guy also won the lottery at some point in time, won something like $50 million, $30 million, something like that. And he just wanted to continue to be sheriff. So poured a bunch of money into his election campaign. By the way, he's up for re-election right now, but he was booked $10,000 bond, which is nothing for somebody who's worth $30 million and or $40 million, $50 million, whatever it is. So he's going to post that bond. He'll get out, but he was originally indicted because he was a part of a TV show called Live PD, and he was indicted for concealing and destroying evidence. It was a video evidence that was related to the death of another black man. His name was Javier Ambler, and it was filmed on Live PD, but it was never aired because Live PD says we're not going to air footage when people die. And so the investigation started. Javier Ambler died, and this guy started to erase evidence, delete evidence. The charges are third-degree felony charges. Those are punishable by up to 10 years in jail. They investigated the use of force in Ambler's death. So this happened back in March of 2019. He was originally pulled over for not having his headlights on. So as he's driving down the road, didn't have his headlights on. According to NHTSA, the NHTSA manual, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, if you don't have your headlights on, it's likely that you're under the influence of alcohol. I forget what the actual number is, but if you're driving without your headlights on, that is a cue that you're under the influence of alcohol. It's in the manual, so you can just go look it up. So make sure your headlights are on. hopefully you're not drinking and driving, but make sure your headlights are on anyways. It's the safe thing to do. But if your headlights are off, the police will pull you over. It's against the law, and you're not allowed to do that. So they think you're under DUI, driving under the influence, because something like 50% of the people who are driving without their headlights on are in fact under the influence of alcohol. It's just something that happens. When you get into your car, you turn everything on, turn the air conditioning on, turn the car on, put it in drive, but people just forget to put the headlight on for some reason. It's just a weird thing that happens, and it does. So they pulled this guy over for that. The deputies repeatedly used the stun gun on him, despite his pleas that he was sick and he couldn't breathe. Court records show that Chody, this fellow right here, Robert Chody, court records show that he is accused of destroying or concealing evidence, and he had the intent to impair their ability as evidence in the investigation of Ambler's death. That is his booking photo. During the actual arrest, during the incident, Ambler can be heard or was heard saying, "I'm not resisting." He's crying, saying, "Sir, I can't breathe. Please, please, please." Williamson's County Sheriff's Office, of course, they had their Department of Internal Affairs investigation. They determined that the deputies didn't violate the pursuit or use of force policies. Of course not. Of course they didn't. Ambler's death was ruled a homicide, according to the report made by the state attorney general's office. They noted that it could have been justifiable. Autopsy revealed that he died of congestive heart failure and hypertensive cardiovascular disease associated with morbid obesity in combination with forcible restraint. So they list all of the problems that a person has, plus the forcible restraint is how they do that. So we see that all the time. We saw that with George Floyd. We've seen that with basically all the other situations that we've covered. Somebody dies as a result of the police, but it wasn't really them. It was all of their other health concerns. In this case, congestive heart failure, hypertensive cardiovascular disease, morbid obesity, all those things. But would that guy have died if he wasn't put in forcible restraints? Probably not. So the police were the final domino. You know, they were the ones that started the whole sequence of events that led to his death. In civil law, we talk about this. It's called it's called the eggshell skull theory. So let's say, for example, you punch somebody in the head, and a normal person would have taken that punch and they would have just fallen to the ground and they would have gotten up and they would have been fine. Okay, it's a normal person. Somebody punches me, I get hit, I fall down. That hurt, maybe have a concussion, but I'm okay, I get back up. Well, if you punch somebody in that same head and that person has a brain defect or something's wrong, or that person, snaps something, or they've got some sort of a condition that is going to result in more serious injury to that individual, then you're responsible for that. Just because that person had that special condition and they die, whereas a normal person would have just been fine and gotten up, they died, you're responsible for that. You're responsible for that death. So in this case, if this sheriff was, forcibly restraining somebody who was morbidly obese, somebody who had hypertension and, cardiovascular problems, he's responsible for that. They're responsible for that in my mind. Now, they're going to have a bunch of excuses as to why they shouldn't be, but this guy, regardless of what you think of the underlying incident, he's also a very, very bad person and a bad police officer, because he was trying to manipulate the evidence that the grand jury agrees with. They reviewed the evidence, they indicted him. We're going to see what happens with that case. We'll certainly follow along there, because we want to make sure that this sheriff gets the same level of justice that he has been disposing, presumably for the last however many decades that he's been involved in law enforcement. Make sure he gets held accountable. He does have a court date coming up. Looks like that is not going to be until November 30th. So this is from the docket out of the state of Texas versus Robert John Chody. He's about 5'10", 170 pounds, got charged with indictment, tampering, fabricating physical evidence with the intent to impair. That's statute 3709, third-degree felony. He had his arraignment, his assignment. He got his felony bond set, $10,000. It's nothing. The next court date is going to be on November 30th, 2020, in front of judicial officers. Officer Stacy Matthews. This is what he's been charged with. This is the statute from Texas. You can see here it says a person commits an offense if, knowing that an investigation or official proceeding is pending, alters, destroys, conceals any record, document, or thing with the intent to impair its verity, legibility, or availability as evidence in the investigation or an official proceeding. So, that statute's all well and good. It's all fine. They give you some increased penalties if the evidence you're destroying is a human body or a human corpse or anything like that. But what I would like to see in this situation is increased penalties for cops, increased penalties for prosecutors. Anybody who's involved that has access to that evidence that is part of a government entity, I think they should be penalized even more. They have a higher duty than somebody else. Somebody else, look, who's flushing drugs down the toilet because the police are breaking in. Police are breaking in, their roommate is passed out, they start throwing drugs down the toilet or something like that, and they get caught with that. Okay, they're attempting to conceal evidence. I get it. Those are, everyday regular civilians. The cops, however, they are the ones who are, have a higher duty, a higher standard of care. So we would like to see more accountability with them. Okay, the final thing I want to talk about today is these two companies, Palantir and RX Vision, I think is the name. I have the slides coming up. These are very interesting companies, very interesting things to be thinking about. Let me tell you a little bit about this company called Palantir. Palantir it's about a decade old. It was founded by a guy named Peter Thiel, who is, a big influencer. He's one of the individuals who's responsible for PayPal. He had some involvement. He basically started PayPal and X.com and all of these different companies with Elon Musk. And so he's sort of in that same echelon. He's not as flamboyant or sort of as provocative as Elon is. He sort of hides behind the scenes, and he is a major angel investor in a lot of these startups. So him and some other individuals are involved in creating this company called Palantir. And this is sort of what it looks like, right? It's a massive database that is gathering all this evidence from all sorts of different alphabet agencies, and it's sort of putting them into a usable format. And it's this company that just went public today. Now, they've been around for 10 years. They have been predominantly working. I think when they were first founded, they were highly connected with the CIA. I think the CIA was their only actual client, their only customer. So they were gathering this data and they were literally giving it to the CIA, and it was a service that they were providing, a contract with them. They did a lot of work overseas. There was some allegation or some indication that their data, their software was actually responsible for helping to capture Osama bin Laden. Now, they've not confirmed that, but why would they, right? You don't confirm those types of things, because then you start to reveal what your capabilities are. So these companies are very secretive. They don't want to talk a lot about how their internal operations work. And in fact, the one that we're going to talk about today doesn't even really have a website. So I want to explain that, but let's talk about first what they're doing. So I want to take a high-level overview on what this looks like, because this is going to be where the future of criminal law is going. We're going to be seeing a lot of these big data, big tech companies who have all the information in the world, consolidating it, and then selling and bundling their services to law enforcement companies. So the LAPD has been highly connected with Palantir, and very recently, BuzzFeedNews.com, believe it or not, regardless of what you think about BuzzFeed, they filed a Freedom of Information Act request, and they got the manuals from Palantir training the LAPD officers on how to use their software. So I want to explain what this is looking like and how this may have some impact on how we practice criminal law and how we live our lives, actually. So let's talk about a police report. What goes into a police report? Why are police reports so important? What are the police doing when they're actually writing a report? Well, they are trying to answer a couple questions. There are things that you have to prove in criminal court, and the police need to have these boxes checked in order to have a valid case against somebody. So we're talking specifically about things like who are they charging? Who is the individual? What are they charging that person for? What did they do? Did they steal a candy bar? When did this happen? Did it happen in recently in time? Because if stuff happened too long ago, you may have lost the statute of limitations. So in other words, you can't file charges for that. It happened too far ago. We're talking about where did this happen? Is it within the court's jurisdiction? What location was it in? If a crime happened in California, we can't do anything about it here in Arizona. It's a California case. That person can come to Arizona. We can extradite them back to California, but we can't charge them with a crime in the state of Arizona. So it's important that we know where this is going, or where it comes from. And we want to know how the crime was committed. Was it a person taking it? Was it embezzling? Was this a wire transfer? How did it work? And we're also thinking about why. Why did that person do that thing? Because some crimes require motive. Some crimes you have to prove, some sort of intent behind the action. We talk about mens rea and actus reus and these things. What we're trying to do here is basically this. So this is an example of what a normal, everyday police officer is doing. They're answering these questions. Who did what? When did they do it? Where did they do it? How did they do it? And why did they do it? Now, some crimes are not a why. Some crimes don't need a why. So the one that we think of most often that requires a why is intentional murder, or we want to know that somebody had some motive, they had an intention to kill somebody, they woke up, they were angry that somebody did something to them, and they go out and they murder that individual. That's required. It's an intentional requirement. We need a mens rea. We need a guilty mind. We need some sort of conscious decision to do something. But there are other crimes that don't require a why. Specifically, I'm talking about crime like what you may have heard of is called statutory rape. Statutory rape is an example where somebody who's over the age of 18 is sleeping with somebody who is under the age of consent. So somebody who's under the age of 18, the age of consent varies in certain places, but they're under that age of consent. Normally, if you're involved in a crime like that, you need some sort of intent. But for statutory rape like that, they're going to say it doesn't matter what your intent was. Doesn't matter if you thought she was 16 or 18 or 35. It doesn't matter. The fact that you had sex with that person by itself, the very act, is criminal. So there is no mental requirement. There is no why that is really necessary. Just the fact that you did it is enough to make you guilty. So the officers are typically doing these things. They're interviewing witnesses. They're watching surveillance footage. They are trying to gather evidence from their personal observations. They're going through their records. They're looking at data. They're gathering forensic evidence. They're sending that all over to the crime lab. And they're doing this by and large, sort of as a person would do it. They're physically going around, gathering this evidence, putting it into terminals, getting reports, writing reports, sending reports, reading reports. And, all of this is just the typical police work. But what happens when the technology that exists, the artificial intelligence systems, the databases from all of the different alphabet agencies, from all of the different online social media portals, and everything gets aggregated into one massive database that has the power of the best computers in the world, processing it, correlating it, indexing it, tagging it, and making it available so that a human being can then interpret it and go do something actionable with it. So here comes Palantir. So Palantir changes the equation, and it looks something more like this. So here we have even more stuff that the computer can do. So in addition to everything else that the officer was doing, we also have access to all of this data. So not only the witness interviews, like an officer went and did an interview, we're talking about witness interviews from every single witness that ever has been interviewed ever in the police department that is logged and cataloged. So it's not that one officer interviewing 5 people he thinks are relevant. It's one officer interviewing those 5 people, but then also being able to access the records, the data, the notes, the information from every other officer who's ever done a witness interview ever in the entire history of the department, because all of that data is logged. Same with surveillance footage. Every single surveillance footage from every single accessible web camera that exists everywhere. It's all getting logged. They have a tattoo database so that they can actually, match tattoos. Stuff that an officer would have a really hard time doing, a computer can do very well. Now, let me back up a little bit of a disclaimer here. I don't know that all of these capabilities are part of what Palantir does. I suspect it just based off of the articles that I've read, but the company's very secretive. They just went public today, so we're going to learn more about them in the upcoming future. But this is this is the public-facing stuff that we're able to see. They also have license plate scanners where you can see specifically, you may not have noticed this in your hometown, but they have vehicles that are set up. The police are scanning every single license plate that goes through, and they're indexing them with location, time, speed, all of that stuff is getting centralized into one particular database. The computer can analyze things like walking style and your gait. You remember that scene from True Lies where Arnold Schwarzenegger is walking down that hall and the computer is analyzing his gait? I think that was a 1990s movie. That's stuff they were already looking at. Now they can just watch how a person walks, watch how 2 people walk, and see if that's the same person. They don't even need a face anymore. They can just say, hey, we have this silhouette of a person who's walking down, Central Avenue. We have this other silhouette of a person. We can just tell from their gait, from their walking style, it's the same person. We can match that up. So this is what a computer is going to help them do. Your online digital presence, every single thing that you've ever posted, said, anything like that, the computer can go crawl that, get that information and integrate it. They have arrest records, not just, your arrest records, but arrest records for everybody from all of the different agencies. In Arizona, Arizona, we have a lot of different agencies. We have the Scottsdale Police, Phoenix Police, Mesa Police. We have the Attorney General's office. We have the Sheriff's Department. We have, agencies for days. And if all of those things get centralized, now what we're talking about are records from every traffic stop, every incident, every conversation, everything is getting centralized. Matching voices, indexing every single thing that happens, every 911 call, all of it. Think of this like a massive Google for potential criminal activity, and they're just consolidating it and they're putting it into a format that is easily accessible. So we see here that this is sort of what it looks like. They have this chart that this is part of their graph disclosure that they're telling us. Native applications provide space for performing link analysis, and we're going to see that it's just basically drawing these relationship lines between a number of different individuals. We're going to get back to Palantir in a minute, but let me show you this other company that is doing some similar work. This is called XR Vision. This is actually their website. So if you Google XR Vision, this is it, right? This is their entire website. This is how secretive they are. They don't want anything being public facing. You can't even click this link. If you want to send them an email, you can't even click it. You got to type that in. There's no more information on their website at all. We have, this is another company, XR Vision, AI-based video content analytics platform for uncontrolled, crowded, in-motion environments. So XR Vision is a leading computer vision startup, AI-based content analytics for uncontrolled, crowded, and in-motion environments. Robust facial recognition solution capable of running on various form factors from wearable, mobile, edge devices. So you can put it on any type of camera, ranked by as the top performing engine in highly challenging environments. So this is the type of stuff that you'd be using in protests, in riots, because there's a lot of movement. This thing needs to be able to track a lot of different faces around the board. Now, I saw this actually posted on another website, and this was linked. My understanding is this actually was posted and came from 4chan originally before it sort of trickled out into the mainstream. I'm not a regular visitor of 4chan, don't have anything against them or anything like that, but they do some of that. They do some really great research, quite frankly. The internet is incredible. And what they were posting, and this, I don't know if this is true or not, or if this is even a legitimate photograph or not, but it looks interesting. And I think it does help describe what this software is capable of doing. So this is just purely illustrative. I'm not trying to draw any conclusions from this. I just want to show you sort of how this works. So this was the shooter that they were talking about who actually shot those two Los Angeles Sheriff's Department officers. And we see here that what they're essentially doing and saying is that, this person here is not the same height as this person. So they know the height of the vehicle, which is the police car, and they know the height of, this individual. And so they're saying that the person here is actually taller than 6'8". And so, they can plug in all of this data. And then what happens is they can come to some pretty good conclusions about it. Same over here, right? We have these different freeze frames. They're matching clothes, they're matching waistlines, they're matching knees, ankles, and they're trying to draw comparisons to match the gait. So they're saying that this individual who was ultimately arrested is actually not the same person as the shooter. That's what the allegation is, I think, from this 4chan graphic here. Now, I don't know if it's an XR Vision thing. I don't know, I don't know if it's true or not, but I do know that when we go to this website, so this is Palantir. You can go there and we can see some pretty interesting things. So let me pull that up right now if I can, and let me turn on this chat and see how everybody's doing out there. It looks like we had a little bit of a drop off in viewers. I'm not sure if the chat is particularly active right now, but let's see how that's going. All right, let's see here. So the chat is on. How's everybody doing? All right. So let me pull up this actual website because there's some pretty interesting things here that we can see. Now, they're very public about this, and we're going to see some interesting data. Give me 1 second. Then we'll get to the chat. Monitors behind me. All right, so when we go to this Palantir website, it's the name of the original service is called Gotham. And we'll see here that Gotham, let me turn off that chat box. Gotham is this software that they're actually upgrading pretty significantly. So this is, when you go to their website, this is Titan, and we're going to scroll down here and we're going to say, okay, Titan is the next generation of Palantir Gotham with new capabilities built on 10 years of learnings from partnerships across battlefields, operations all around the world, and it's the leading in innovation, all these different modules. They gave a major platform upgrade. It's a force multiplier. All right, this is where we want to dive in a little bit. So this here we can see that this is somebody called Kaylee Accomplice. So when they type this person's name in, we're going to see that they have this type of data. So it's a mock program, unclassified. We can see that they've got all of the information, date of birth, social security number, all of the media that they have associated with this individual, criminal activity timeline. They can see, things like stolen vehicle in the area, robbery at USA Bank. But that is not really what they're doing with this. This is not like, yes, of course we're going to log a robbery. Of course we're going to, log a stolen vehicle. But it's more than that. We're logging the last known location of the vehicle because they've got license scanners all over the place. So it's really in-depth information. This is more information that they've got. Violation is terrorist financing, right? They're going to make these people in their demos look out to be, the worst in the world. But the issue is, it's basically just, gobbling up all of the information you can possibly gather about a person, and it's putting it together. And it's saying, you've been at these locations. It's connecting you to all of the other potential people that financial fraud alerts. It's making these connections between phone numbers and the different organizations. And so it's extremely powerful. It's mapping data. It's showing hot spots based on particular activity. Where were people at a particular time? Who were they connected with? I mean, it's extremely, extremely robust. And the question then becomes for you, the everyday citizen, somebody who is not a criminal, but somebody whose information is getting just, roped up into this stuff. What do you think about that? Is this going to be something that really impedes your civil liberties? What's going to happen when somebody does get caught up in a situation where the computer says that that person is guilty or that they're more involved than they were, but the computer says it? But the defense attorney is saying that didn't happen. Well, how can a defense attorney beat $31 billion worth of technology that says otherwise? It's going to be very difficult. And the question is also going to be, as this goes through, what are the courts going to do about this stuff? Are they going to say that this is reasonable? So when we talk a lot about privacy and your right to privacy, the standard under the law is a reasonable expectation of privacy. Do you, as a person, have a reasonable expectation of privacy? Well, it depends, right? If you're inside your home, you've got a pretty reasonable expectation of privacy. It's reasonable that you want to be private in your home. And the court recognizes that. That's why we need a warrant to get into your home. That's why they need exigent circumstances to break, to basically, kick the door in and go in and do what the police want to do. They need those requirements. But if this is happening outside of your car, or let's say, do you have reasonable expectation of privacy to the outside of your vehicle? Well, no, of course not, because you're driving around all over the place. So if these license plate scanners are scanning your license plate and logging your number, your location and your time of day, if they know where you're coming from, where you're going, what you're doing, if they can track every single, if they have a vehicle scanner up here and down here, they can see where you were, how long, where'd you stop, and all of that stuff. That may give them enough information to go get a warrant, to then go and, get your cell phone data, to then geo-track you, to go, ping some bank records or whatever that looks like. But it's a concerning thing because the Supreme Court thus far has said, pretty unequivocally that you don't have a certain expectation of privacy in certain public things. And so if all of this company is doing is just gathering a lot of public information, even though it's aggregated and comprehensive, do you have an expectation of privacy to that massive amount of data? And this is going to be something that the courts are going to decide. And Amy Coney Barrett is very likely going to be on the court. So how is she going to rule on that? We just don't know yet. Anybody have any thoughts on that? On Palantir and this massive data? Let's go over to the comments. All right, so I'm pulling open the comments here. I want to thank everybody for being a part of the program today. And let's take a look. Any questions? Everybody for being there. All right, R&R Law Group. How about Lynn Wood suing Joe Biden for calling Kyle a white supremacist in the debate? Yeah, hey, Brett, we talked about that yesterday. And I know that L. Lynn Wood, I think Ron Coleman, there's another attorney, his name escapes me right now. They are all threatening to file that defamation lawsuit. I am not a defamation lawyer. So basically, if I'm speaking on this, it's just from what I learned about law school. But in my mind, Kyle Rittenhouse is not a public figure in any way. He was not seeking media notoriety. He was not putting himself into the public eye. He was out there being a part of a volunteer group who was there to protect property and possessions and things like that. So he was not seeking out the public eye. This is a situation that happened to him. And so what that means is that he's not a public figure. So when you're not a public figure and people are making defamatory statements about you and publicly posting that you're part of a white supremacist in Kenosha like Joe Biden did on his Twitter, that is not okay. You can't. I understand that they're in the middle of a political campaign and they want to lump all of this into one. And Kyle Rittenhouse has become this massive lightning rod from people from both, from all different sides. But Joe Biden's campaign can't do that. So because he's not a public figure, they don't need to show actual malice, and they can just use, regular a much lower standard in order to succeed on their claim. So I'll be interested to see how that goes forward. Again, I'm not a civil lawyer. I think Ron Coleman is and some of these other guys, but it will be curious to see where that goes. And quite frankly, I think it was improper of the Biden campaign to do that. I know that Kyle Rittenhouse is like I said, a lightning rod, still inappropriate. So hopefully they retract that and it doesn't need to go the lawsuit route, but I'm not holding my breath on that. Never trust a lawyer. Says it's scary how much they want to know about us all. It is scary. It is scary. Zulu Zeit says, did Biden mention Kyle by name? So not that I have seen. I did not see it in the ad. And what's up, Zulu? Good to see you again. Not by name, but we did play the clip, I think, yesterday, and there's a freeze frame that we covered where it's Joe Biden's Twitter accounts, at Joe Biden, and it says something about white supremacists. We highlighted that, and then there's a freeze frame. Kyle Rittenhouse, they have a photo of him, one of the more iconic photos of him kind of, shouting as he's running down the street. So presumably he's calling Kyle Rittenhouse a white supremacist. He's lumping him in that category, which I think is defamatory. There's no evidence of that. We've covered Kyle Rittenhouse a lot on this channel. Seen no evidence of any white supremacy at all. Brian Reinhardt says, do you feel that the system can evolve into a similar scoring system as used in China? I think we're already there, my friend. I think we're already there. I think there's a lot of public information that is being housed by Google and Facebook and by a lot of the big tech companies. And I think that the government, through their contracts with a lot of these private organizations, I think they've got data and records and scorecards on probably everybody. I think the other big thing is these DNA companies. There are people giving up their DNA to all of these different companies, and their privacy policies and their terms of service and all those things are like 1,000 pages long. So nobody knows what's happening with that data. So I think that this is all already being accumulated. I just don't think that a lot of people have done a good job of aggregating it together. So now we are seeing these mega companies like Palantir, which just had their IPO today for $31 billion. They're not even profitable yet. So they're still operating at a loss, but they just got valued at $31 billion. It's massive. I mean, that's on par with, I don't know, Instagram, I think. I don't know what Instagram's worth these days, but it's a big tech company. And so now what they're doing is, think of this as like the Google of criminal law and criminal law enforcement and interfacing with government data. But if you think that Google doesn't have the same information about you already, I think that they do. They have the data and the capabilities to do the in-depth data analysis, but they probably just have not done it yet. They have the ability to do it. They don't have the tools yet, but they could spin that up in a matter of very little time in order to produce the results that they want to produce. It's a very interesting time. All right, much of the data and work at R&R Law Group was describing was already being used for the same purpose by law enforcement. Major difference is that a machine can analyze and synthesize it much faster. Yeah, and I think the main benefit of the software is that it can analyze everything. So everything. So it's not, like I said, it's not only one witness. An officer goes and interviews 5 witnesses. He knocks on 5 neighbors' doors and asks them those same questions. But then they go back to the computer, and every single witness that has ever been interviewed by every cop ever that has an audio recording which has been transcribed, or body cameras which has been transcribed and analyzed and integrated, they can just start pulling data from all of these different places. So like every single officer is sort of a superhuman extension, and the data is being gathered by a lot of these agencies. We have no idea it's being our information is being gobbled up. We saw Edward Snowden just on Joe Rogan's show talking about this massive just spy dragnet system of just spying and it's going to be very curious to see where this goes. I'm not sure how the courts are going to deal with it, but it certainly is concerning from a civil liberties, right to privacy, defense attorney's standpoint. John Perryman says Google has huge amounts of data and they collect your search arguments from your browser. Yeah. And I just watched that Social Dilemma this past weekend, and a lot of people are talking about that. Like, oh my gosh, did you know that they're doing this? Yeah, I definitely knew, definitely was concerned about, have been concerned about it for a long time. And you're talking to somebody who puts a lot of content out on the internet, right? I put a lot of content out, do this show. I've done a lot of podcasts. I've done, a lot of my personal story are out there and other people's podcasts and stuff. So I'm a little bit more comfortable with a public-facing persona than many other people, and I'm concerned about it. I'm concerned about how much data and what they can do with this data, because I see it. I see people wrongfully accused on a regular basis. But now, if somebody's wrongfully accused, but a computer that is worth $50 billion, they determined that a person was at this location and did all these things, and the algorithm says that somebody's guilty. How do I get to defend against that? Are they going to give me access to the source code? Can I go and have my investigators or my computer programmers or my software engineers or anybody on my team, any of my expert witnesses, go in and deconstruct how their algorithm works and where their data is coming from and validate all of those things? No way are they going to let that happen. We run into this battle now with, stupid little, intoxilizer machines. We have to fight for data over, DUI investigations and this type of stuff. And this is ground level, old technology, old ancient stuff. Now we're talking about massive supercomputers that rival Google's technology and Google's power, but they have access to even more pertinent data because they directly interface with law enforcement, which are granted special privileges by our politicians. The question is really how reliable circumstantial evidence is in court. This gives you droves of circumstantial evidence, which isn't sufficient to prove something by itself. Yes and no, right? You want more direct evidence than circumstantial evidence, but I've seen people convicted on circumstantial evidence all the time. And so the difference between the two is, for example, the example that prosecutors use all the time. So prosecutors convict people on circumstantial evidence all the time. The way they do it is they say, look, as a jury, you're entitled to make inferences about what you think happened. And the example that these prosecutors use is, well, let's say you're in a place where it snows, okay? Typically not Scottsdale, Arizona, or Phoenix, or anywhere in the valley. But if you're up in a place where it snows and you're standing outside and you see that it's snowing and you see the snow hit the ground, you can say, I've got some direct evidence. I saw the snow fall and hit the ground. When you wake up the next morning, or when you watch the snow pile up, you say, yep, there's the snow. I saw it. Now, let's say it's not snowing. You're out there for dinner. It's not snowing. You go to bed. You wake up the next morning. You come out for breakfast. There's snow all over the ground. It's circumstantial, but you can infer that the snow came from the sky and landed on the ground, and that is that's evidence, right? So you can make that conclusion. You didn't have to see the snow fall on the ground, but because it's there, you can make an inference that it came from the sky and there wasn't a man out there, with a snow truck dumping snow all over your yard. So that's the example that prosecutors use all the time, and juries, they get it. They understand that, and they will convict people on circumstantial evidence. Google engineers couldn't even tell you why the algorithm came to a specific conclusion. It's all machine learning. Do the Dems have any legit means to hold up the Senate vote on ACB? I don't think so. I do not. Not anything in the ordinary course of business. If they wanted to go ahead and file an impeachment, if they wanted to impeach Trump again, or if they wanted to impeach Bill Barr, one of those things, we covered this on a previous show. AOC was floating this idea around, but the idea is that if the House initiates the impeachment proceedings per the rules, then the Senate has to stop its business, because if you remember back to the last impeachment that we had, the House initiates the impeachment. So they're the ones who sort of file the charges. They're like a grand jury. They commit the indictment, but then that will go over to the Senate, and the Senate has the trial. So the Senate will then at that point be the body that would convict that individual. So if the House initiates and files the indictment or actually impeaches the president, then, or Bill Barr or anybody, then the Senate, because they're going to be the ones who are receiving the trial, they actually have to pause their business. They can't keep going. So if that happens, then they can't do the confirmation hearing. So Senate business is paused until the impeachment is sort of done. That's how I read the rules. I've not seen that happen in practice, but that is one thing that they could do. Whether they do or not, we will see. Palantir is the device that Saruman used to communicate with Sauron and Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. Yeah, that's true. I have never actually seen Lord of the Rings. I was thinking about this morning when I was reading about Palantir, and I read that this was a seer stone or something like that, where they look into it and they can see what's going on the other side of the world or something like that. Never seen Lord of the Rings, never saw Harry Potter. There was like all of those trilogies that happened in the 90s, I think, 90s and early 2000s. For some reason, I missed all of it. Don't know why. Have you seen the Patriot Act used more for good or bad? I think that's sort of a moral question we really have to answer with this sort of software. I'm not a cybersecurity person or a national security person. I'm not well versed on it, but from what everything that we saw from Snowden, everything that we saw from all of those leaks, and this idea that the government was literally jacking in to the backbone of the internet and gobbling all of the metadata up from every single source, every single phone call, every single text message, everything that you did, every email, all of it was being gathered up and captured and cataloged and organized. In my mind, that is such an egregious, gross overuse of power that it is disgusting. And I was working on a video on Edward Snowden, and I got sidetracked by a lot of other things. But I hats off to that guy. I think he's a hero. I think what he did was detail something that was a gross overreach of government power, and I'm really glad that came to light. I'm glad that program is over, that they tell us, but I don't think that there's any real lasting good that came out of that. I think a lot of these things, our national security, our fight against terrorism, the protection of what we need to protect as Americans, I think that's all achievable without this massive dragnet of domestic spying that is really just invading all of our lives, and people are becoming more and more accepting of it. I was having a conversation with my friend talking about this Edward Snowden thing after he was on Joe Rogan, and it didn't even really resonate with him that they were capturing everything. I said, do you understand that, right? Every text message, every email, every phone call, everything you ever posted on the internet was being gobbled up somewhere. He's, well, I kind of figured that was happening anyways. So what? I already thought that was happening. And I think many people are just getting acclimated to that. And it's kind of a scary thing. I'm not an anti-technology person. I love tech and geek, and I built this whole deal out, and I love fiddling around with this stuff. But the idea that they can just take everything and then process it the way they want is certainly concerning to me. Do you think the Patriot Act is going away given the multi-billion-dollar industries that have spawned? I don't. I really don't. I think that people are going to just sort of give up more and more and more, right? If you can, think about the Alexas everywhere. I think I have them here, not one in this room. Sorry if that just triggered your stuff. All of the Amazon Echoes, all of the, the in-home devices, this idea that there's this Internet of Things that's blossoming. I was watching this talk from this tech guy, and he was explaining that the next evolution of the internet, we had a point in time where we had sort of, dial-up internet, then broadband internet, then we had Web 2.0, then we had the social media revolution, then we have streaming revolutions and all these things. The next progression of that is this Internet of Things. Everything is connected to the internet. Your light switches, which a lot of people are moving that way already. Light switches will now automatically just connect to your home network. Your lights will home connect, automatically connect. Microwave, dishwashers, refrigerators, everything, your car, Teslas, everything is connected. And if that's the case and everything is listening, then people are going to give up a little of their privacy, a little bit of their security for convenience. And so if, Apple comes out with a new device that does something pretty cool, but it just needs access to like everything you have, but it's still pretty cool. Most people are going to go, all right, I got nothing to hide anyways. I mean, this makes my life a lot simpler, so why not? I'll just go buy that thing. What do you think about Daniel Cameron allegedly throwing the case? I got a lot of issues with Daniel Cameron. We've been covering that story and Breonna Taylor a lot here at length. I think what we are seeing from him is a gross display of prosecutorial misconduct. The thing stinks so badly from top to bottom, and we've covered it pretty at length. You know, his press conference, I thought he was cherry picking evidence. He gave an interview that we covered yesterday on the show. I think it was yesterday on the show, where he was also sort of, you know, he comes off to me as somebody who's pretty confident, even borderline arrogant about what he has done in this case, and he thinks that these questions are almost insulting to him. And we read his public statement about what his position is on this thing, and he's going to stick by it. Now, they were supposed to release the grand jury transcripts or the recordings yesterday. They're going to release them tomorrow, I believe. So we'll start listening through those, and the internet's going to have a field day with those. So we'll see what comes of those. But maybe he presented a good case. I don't think so. I don't think there's any evidence of that. The grand juror now filed a motion for he wants to speak out, or she, whomever that is. And so the judge wants them released. Everybody's going to see really what happened in this case. And if I'm wrong, if Daniel Cameron presented charges that he should have presented, we'll see. But he himself indicated that it sounds like he didn't present any evidence about possible indictments for the people who actually shot and killed Breonna Taylor. I will never use an A or an iPhone or any Amazon thing. He's black. You always say one wise... Oh, wait, he's talking to somebody else. At R&R Law Group, I personally wish Barr would treat Snowden with more respect, but that's one thing I dislike about Barr. I think it's one of the reasons we've not had Snowden pardoned. Yeah, I mean, to me, Snowden, as far as I can tell, is a hero. There was a lot of talk back when all of this was going down about, this idea that he was releasing information that was dangerous to American troops, or releasing information that would jeopardize our national security and those types of things. It was like, I think he was getting sort of lumped in with Julian Assange and WikiLeaks and those in that organization. But from what I have seen from Edward Snowden, he did everything right. He ran this story through The Guardian and Glenn Greenwald and all those people, and it was absolutely something the public should have known about. Absolutely. And it was insulting that we didn't know about it. And it was a big revelation. And he's an American hero in my book, and I would love to see him pardoned. I'm not real sure that's going to happen, but at least we're discussing it. I mean, my goodness, what would be amazing to see that happen. I would be all on board with that. The problem is prosecutor immunity. Even the Duke lacrosse prosecutor, Mike Nifong, only got 24 hours in jail for trying to railroad 3 men for 30 years each. Yeah, gosh, I don't remember that. I remember the case, but I don't remember what Mike Nifong got. Yeah, 24 hours. If that's accurate on that, I mean, that's par for the course. That's what happens. Prosecutors, judges, politicians, police officers, there's a different tier of justice for those people. Yeah, Mike Nifong could have sent 3 kids to prison for 10 years each for rape, but he only gets 24 hours. It's because there's a different system for them. All right, a couple other questions. Brett Hogan, do you want to see arrests from Spygate? If there's an offense committed, I would absolutely like to see an arrest from that. I don't know a lot of the details there. I get really concerned during an election year when it's political accusations going back and forth. Until we see an indictment, until we see, there's a lot of allegations against Hunter Biden. There's a lot of allegations against the Trump family in a lot of different ways. His taxes and, what's his son's name? Don Jr., right? Don Jr. was in that meeting with the Russians. And so, both sides of the political aisle are trying to indict each other and claim that they're violating the law and they're all criminals. But until there's a little bit more than just the political stones being thrown, it's hard to comment on those things. At R&R, how old are you, good sir? Great content. I'm 35. Thanks for asking. 35 years old, and well, that's it. Is that a good age? Is that young? Is that old? What happened to the George Floyd case? Well, those 4 cops are they're still going through the system. So we can take a look at the George Floyd case, if I can pull that up. Let's see here. George Floyd, he's got 4 cops. We've got Tad Thau. We've got Derek Chauvin. When we pull up the high-profile cases, you can see sort of about what's going on. George Floyd, Derek Chauvin. So if you go on the Minnesota website, you'll see that they actually have the ability to go check out these cases. So when we go here, you'll see that down here, let's say we want to go over to Derek Chauvin. We'll see that he's got actually about 6 days ago, discovery disclosure was filed. We've got some correspondence taking place, memorandum of the law. We've got state's notice, more correspondence, motion for reconsideration. So there was an order from the judge disqualifying the prosecutor's office. They're responding that. Motions to dismiss for lack of probable cause. Let's see. A lot of activity going on. So these cases are, they're still pending. Not sure when the next court date is, but when we do have a next court date, another court date, we will bring you back, or we'll have an update on that. All right. Well, listen, everybody, it's about 5:30. Thank you so much for being here. I am going to wrap it up. I want to thank you so much for being here. It's a lot of fun to have these conversations. We're going to do it every day of the week at Arizona time, 4 p.m., which is the same time as Pacific. So California, West Coast, 4 p.m. On the East Coast, it's going to be 7 p.m. for you fellas and ladies. And we're going to be back here tomorrow doing the same thing. If you, as a quick refresher, if you know anybody in the state of Arizona you know or love and they've been charged with a crime, do me a favor, send them our way. We have an awesome team here. We love to help people get through the criminal justice system and get back on their feet. If you have not already done so, check out my book on Amazon. If you haven't seen it, it's called Beginning to Winning: How to Fight Your Case and Succeed in the Criminal Justice System. Got a lot of information in there about, how to win your case, how to start, how to begin, and then how to win your case. I wrote the whole thing. It's on Amazon. Hopefully none of you have been charged with a crime, but if you know anybody who has, send them my book, and we'd love to have you buy a copy and leave a nice review. So that's it for me today. Quick reminder to subscribe, share the show. If you say, hey, this is a good live stream, we have good content, good conversations, good Q&A, send that to somebody so that they can join us. And you can tell them I said that. You can say, hey, look, there's this guy on YouTube. He keeps telling me to share his show every day. He says, hey, share it. So I'm sharing it. I feel bad for him. He's kind of begging at this point. So just blame it, throw it right on me, and I'm fine with that. So that's it for tonight. Have an awesome evening. I want to thank everybody once